In this video, I'm going to teach you how to do some really magical and outstanding portraits with any entry-level drone. Hello, my name is Chris Attrell. I have taught beginner photography to over 6,000 students all across Western Canada. And I've been doing drone portraits for about 3 years now. There is something enchanting and magical about doing drone portraits. And they are a lot of fun, and they bring a lot of value to normal portrait photo shoots. For this lesson, I'm going to be using my DJI Phantom 4, my DJI Mavic Mini, and my DJI Mavic 2 Pro with zoom. What I'm about to teach you, however, can be used on almost any drone. We're going to cover camera settings, drone techniques, posing tips, and other regular tips and tricks that'll maximize your experience. In case you haven't noticed, I'm pretty excited doing this video. This is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. The biggest difference when you're doing drone portraits is that you're looking for texture, shapes, and patterns. As well, you want to really use contrasting colors. If you're shooting on a golf course, you don't want your subject wearing green. If you're shooting in snow, you don't want them wearing white. Finding those texture, shapes, and patterns can be rather difficult when you're standing on the ground. That's why before I even do a portrait photo shoot with my drone, I put my drone in the air with the camera facing down and I look for interesting texture, shapes, and patterns. I especially like spots that frame the subject. Since the drone battery only lasts about 15 to 20 minutes, you should do the exploration part in advance. So first, let's go over camera settings. There's 2 different methods that I use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch from video mode to camera mode. This is done in the DJI app. Once you're in camera mode, you have the option to shoot in manual mode if you want. Most of these drones have a fixed aperture, so it has to stay at 2.8. Then you can set the ISO to 100 and choose whatever shutter speed is required to get the correct exposure. That is what most photographers will probably use. However, there's another option, and this is the option I use the most. I switched the camera to auto mode. Yes, that's right. I'll use auto mode for most of my drone portraiture. The chances are very good that your drone is going to choose 100 ISO anyway and get the correct exposure. What I do in auto mode is I use exposure compensation to brighten or darken the image. Here's how you use the exposure compensation in the app. Not all drones are the same, but they all do have exposure compensation in it somewhere. With exposure compensation, when you go to -1 value, you're 1 stop darker. When you go to +1, you're 1 stop brighter. When you're finished using exposure compensation, always put it back to 0 for next time. It will not reset itself when you turn your drone off and then back on. The second option you want to look at is JPEG versus RAW. Pro photographers like shooting in RAW because it saves a lot more of the data so you can bring up more shadows and color. However, if you're just doing this for fun and you don't plan on doing an awful lot of editing, don't feel bad about choosing JPEG. Most of my drone portraits are done in JPEG. I do, however, shoot in RAW sometimes. In your app, under the camera settings, choose RAW or JPEG. If you're not sure, just choose JPEG. This way, you can edit the pictures with your phone and post them to social media immediately. And look at this picture. It looks just fine without shooting in RAW. There are other advanced options that you can look at once you get started with drone portraits, but for beginners, this really is all you need to know for now. And in fact, 99% of the time, these are the only settings I use. But let's go over some of the techniques. All these drones are set to autofocus by default, and it works just fine in most cases. But it's not perfect. That's why when you're doing drone portraits, simply touch the screen where your subject is till it clicks and says autofocus. You want to make sure the autofocus is on your subject and not the ground or a tree branch in the way. It's hard to tell if you're in focus when you're looking on a small screen. This way you can ensure you're focused on your subject. Doing drone portraits in harsh, bright sun doesn't always look that great. Sometimes you have no choice. The best time to do drone portraits, in my opinion, is when there's soft clouds that diffuse the light perfectly. It's hard for people to keep their eyes open when the sun is right above them. Or of course you can shoot early in the day or late in the day when the sun's on the horizon. And like you want to do in studio portraits, you don't want to have the light source above them or below them. So when they're laying on the ground and the sun's beneath them, they're going to have some strange light coming up their face or down their face. Most of the time, when my subject is laying on the ground, I want the sun to be to the right or to their left. But again, you can't always control those kind of things. But as much as possible, make sure your lighting looks appealing on your subject. Most of my drone portraits are with my camera facing straight down and my model is laying on the ground. When you're doing this style, you want to make sure the camera is facing directly down, not mostly down. Just a little bit of angle will be noticeable in the picture. In fact, as a beginner, you should just start shooting straight down at 45-degree angles or point of view. You can break that rule, of course, but those generally are the safest angles to do drone portraits with. Unlike normal photography, it's very difficult to communicate with your model while you're shooting because the drone is loud, and it's hard to get the details on your model's face when you're looking through a little tiny screen. This is why I recommend you kind of go over how they're going to pose before you shoot, and shoot more than you normally would. It's hard to see if they're squinting or if their eyes are closed. That's why I generally take 5 shots before I move on to the next pose. And get close and far away. When I first started doing drone portraits, for some reason I stayed way too far away from the subject so they looked itty-bitty in each picture. Now I do a blend of close, medium, and far away. Sometimes the far away ones look really cool with all the textures and shapes around them. Another fun thing to add value to your drone portraits is to bring props like bikes, swords, hockey sticks. The exciting thing about drone portraits is it's going to kind of provoke a creative instinct in you. So let's go over some other posing ideas. First of all, when you're laying flat on the ground, you don't want to just shoot people laying flat on the ground. They don't look that interesting. And you really have to watch for the head movement. When you're laying on the ground, your head kind of looks like this. You need them to keep their head straight so it looks natural. And I like them to straighten their back, so they're not just laying flat. And with arms, it's kind of neat to have the arms moving around in different directions. You don't just want their arms laying there doing nothing. And with legs, it can be kind of simple. Just laying on the ground looks fine too, but oftentimes I like to have one knee raised. But if you have one knee raised, make sure it's slightly over the other knee and not spread apart. And I put a link to a whole bunch of my drone portraits in the description below so you can kind of see what me and the models I've shot with have done in the past. If your model's wearing a dress, have them spread it out. If they've got long hair, you could do the same as well. And guess what? With these drones, you can do selfies. Inside the app, there's an option to have your drone automatically take a picture every 3 seconds, or 5 or 10. Just go into the camera menu, photo, and then choose time shots. This way, you can get your drone in position, start the camera, and then position yourself. All you have to do is hide the controller. Looks pretty fun, doesn't it? I put some links to some recommended drones in the description below. For example, the Mavic Mini does a great job, but it's not for somebody who's going to be using it all the time. Whereas the Mavic 2 Pro Zoom, it's kind of expensive, but if you're going to be doing this kind of photography a lot, you might want to consider that. And of course, you want to check your local laws and regulations for where you can fly the drone. But that doesn't mean I'm willing to fly it anywhere. If there's a lot of other people around, I don't want to ruin their enjoyment by having this loud drone hovering over them. Unfortunately, drones don't come with the option to shoot in landscape or portrait orientation. It's landscape only. So if you want portrait orientation, all you have to do is turn your drone around. It's kind of awkward looking at your subject in this manner, but it does give you portrait orientation. The alternative would be to shoot in landscape and then crop it. I will be posting some videos this winter on how I edit my pictures in Lightroom. I don't do a lot of editing and I don't Photoshop. In fact, all my edits are done in less than 5 minutes. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos, including those ones. And here's a little word of advice. The cameras on these drones are excellent, but they're still not the same quality as DSLR or mirrorless cameras. So you should only have modest expectations of how much editing you can do with these pictures. But they still look fantastic, and if you do it right, you don't have to do much editing anyway. And here is a tip from my wife. Because the batteries in the drones only last about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe you should pick up an extra battery or two. I usually carry 3 of them with me. And if you happen to get a great drone portrait and you want me to see it, please tag me when you post it to Instagram. I can't wait to see what you've done. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching.